Joe, we head up to Ohio, though, because they've been the talk of college football the last couple of days because of Urban Meyer's comments about his former team, that being the Ohio State Buckeyes. Look, I'm going to paraphrase what Urban said here, but it sent trickles across the country. But why, I have no idea, like you mentioned in pre-show, well, Blake, because it's June. Urban Meyer said nothing when he stated this week that they might be one of the most talented teams ever. Like, a lot of people think that. And he talked about offense, defense, special teams. He talked about the coaching staff. I mean, Urban Meyer might not be wrong here. It's what we've all been discussing about Ohio State since they've done so well in the portal. And look, it's been known that they went out and spent money in the portal. I guess my thing is, or my question to you is he wrong?
Okay, here's where I'm sitting with this. I look at this roster and I think it is tremendously gifted, and it's also super deep at a number of important positions. I'm talking about at receiver, and you moved on from Marvin Harrison Jr., who went on to the NFL, and the receiving room I think is more diverse than it was last year, because when Emeka Egbuka was unavailable for spurts throughout the season, it felt like there was really no secondary option. Now Jeremiah Smith might be a huge, important player for them. Carnell Tate is going to be a sophomore. Emeka Egbuka does come back. There's a lot of options. The running back room is super gifted. Their defensive line is too deep. Their secondary looks phenomenal. But I do not want to put all my chips in the table to an argument like this, saying that they're one of the best ever, because there have been some ridiculously gifted teams in the history of football that we have watched. And it all starts with 2019 LSU. It starts with 2001 Miami. 2018 Clemson is one that comes to mind. Multiple Alabama teams that we've seen that they've won national titles, particularly that 2020 team, which maybe we didn't get to see the full scope of their dominance had they have been able to play a full season. So I just don't want to chalk up a team as one of the greatest ever, because there are so many ridiculously talented teams with Heisman Trophy winners, first-round picks, when this team hasn't stepped on the field yet. And this team last year fell short of the accomplishment of the goal, which is beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten, and winning a national championship. They went 0 for 3 in all of those things. So we need to wait before we crown something like this. And Urban's going to prop up his team, which is understandable. But as a non-Ohio State affiliated individual, Blake, I would like to wait before we make that statement.
But see, here's the problem I have. That's not what he said. And I think that's how it was taken.
It is.
No, what he said was,
I watched the video. You want me to read the quote?
There's a mass. Yes. And when you get to the word could be, I want you to stop. Because
as of now, this is one of the most talented rosters in the last decade, maybe ever. That's a big statement, said former Buckeyes head coach Urban Meyer.
No, you got to go to the video. That's not the direct quote. Go back and watch the video.
It is.
No, it's not. Where he says could be.
I watched the video and I pulled this from an article. Do you have it written down and it's a different quote?
Yeah, I have could be.
I'm going to go pull up the video.
This is from the USA Today. Urban Meyer states that Ohio State, and I'm quoting here, could be one of the best college football rosters of all time. And I watched the video. So if it's not could be, then I have a big problem with my argument.
So he says this is the most talented, one of the most talented rosters in the last decade.
One of the most talented rosters. So regardless if it's could be, one of, could be, whatever, I think he's not wrong, though. I don't think that he is wrong in saying that they could be one of the more talented rosters that we've seen. Now, to your point, they have to get on the field and prove it. I don't think anybody's going to argue. It's why we play the game. I mean, we don't just talk about the talent they have. You got to go out there and play the games. Joe, I'm not necessarily for sure that he's wrong in the sense of, like you mentioned. I do think that they have question marks. Obviously, a lot of people's question mark is Will Howard, the interior of their offensive line. Okay, but Joe, look, what we've seen from kids in the portal, it's ridiculous. I don't know if Will Howard's not going to be better than he was at Kansas State with the talent that he has around him. I don't know. if you have two transfers, one we'll talk about in a minute, that might be at running back, that might get actual reps at running back. What do they do? So I understand why everybody's like, oh, I mean, they haven't even played a game yet. And, well, of course it's Urban Meyer. He was at Ohio State. No, but the truth is, it's what all of us have been talking about with them, about how highly talented they are. Joe, they have one of the best odds to win the national championship. They're at 2, right behind Georgia. When we do our preseason rankings, hold on one second. When we do our preseason rankings and when we talk about teams that we think that are going to make the playoff, Joe, it's going to be right there. And what we've already labeled and said has been, okay, everybody around college football has been, hey, it is national title or bust for them. Now, if they don't get there, then that's going to be on Ryan Day, who's under a lot of pressure, and they failed to meet the expectations of it. But to say that we can't look at them at the current moment on paper and say, Joe, name another team that has more talent than they do right now.
Georgia. Well, so this is what I was just about to say. There's another angle I'm going to get to in a second. But
so Georgia,
the fact that they're not even the number 1 in the national title odds, because we all know that Georgia's the most gifted team.
Neither was
and the most
those teams that you talked about. The 2001 Miami team wasn't. The 2019 LSU team wasn't. The 2018 Clemson team wasn't. You know, in 2018 and 2019, you know who the best odds to win the national titles were? Who? Go ahead and say them. Alabama. So we look at that. So, Joe, there's 100.
Wait. Okay. Forget the title odds for a second, though. You and I are both smart enough and have done enough preseason research to know that the Georgia team is
I'm not going to dispute.
Very, very talented.
There's only one. So there's only one. So basically, Nick Saban in Athens, has a better odd and has more talent. Sure. But there comes a point where, Joe, we're not going to say that there's 129 other teams besides Ohio State that on paper at the current moment has more than they do. Because you would be a fool to run out here and say that there's 129 more teams that have more talent than they do.
Obviously, I'm not going to make that statement that there's 129 teams that have more talent. That'd be a dipshit. Anyone would be a dipshit to say that. But the point is here. The point is here, Blake, is to crown a team as a champion essentially before the season's been played is where the red flag goes up for me. And I think that you mentioned that there are some roster question marks. A lot of the teams that we have talked about and we've brought up that had these historic seasons that were so freaking dominant throughout every single play, every single game, they were talented front to back, and they were led by gifted quarterbacks that had been there for a period of time. Even one of the best Ohio State teams in the past decade we could think of was the one that had Justin Fields that got to the national championship game. And Justin Fields was a far more gifted college quarterback than what Will Howard is. So I just need to see what Will Howard's going to do and what some of these other roster holes are before I can crown them something that aggressively. The other angle on this, though, Blake, that I think is important to address, though, why the hell is Urban saying this? Why is he selling out his guy, Ryan Day? And why is Jim Tressel chiming in and saying the same thing? Why would you put – there's already ridiculous expectations. We have already said this on this show, that there are unbelievable expectations for Ohio State, and you just screwed your guy by saying this.
But see, that's another angle that I don't understand. If Urban Meyer wouldn't have said nothing, if Jim Tressel wouldn't have said nothing, the same conclusion, if they don't succeed and get where they need to be, the same conclusion is going to be there. Joe, in December, let's just say hypothetically they get bounced in the playoff. What's the narrative going to be about this team and Ryan Day? We're not going to go back to, and say, oh, well, remember in the beginning of the season when Urban Meyer said X, Y, and Z about Ohio State? It's going to be the season's going to be so long that we're not going to remember that.
Obviously, but it's continuing to build the momentum that this expectation that Ohio State has to win a national championship this year.
So what's the difference between me and everybody else saying the same exact thing? Now, I get that Urban is
because
different.
you're not a former national championship winning coach, and also he's
actually that's bullshit, because on NCAA 14 I won 10 straight national championships. So I don't want to hear anything. Okay?
Sorry, Blake, I forgot about that. But this is how declarative the statement was that he had is where I come from. that where I have the problem of why is he selling out Ryan Day like this? And to add in Tressel's quote for anybody who didn't see it, I've never seen that many great players in that building all at once. Every position, every place you turn. So Ryan has done a great job. Ohio State has done a great job. They're both so declarative. They've both been around really good teams that have gone to national titles. Why? Why would you put this on his shoulders?
I understand what you're saying. I understand it. I just don't think it matters. Like, it's not going to care. Like, Joe, it's a pebble or a grain of sand on the beach when on everybody else that's going to be attacking them if they don't succeed. Again, when let's just say hypothetically in December that they lose to Michigan, is anybody going to really pull up what Urban Meyer said in June?
No one is going to, and it's not about that what happens at the end of the season, they fall short. No one's going to go,
what happens if they –
this is all Urban Meyer's fault.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's play the opposite card of all this. What happens if they succeed?
Then mission accomplished.
No. If you build in the beginning, there's got to be a yin and yang.
See, I think it may – okay, actually, to answer that question, I think it makes it more exciting if they succeed.
That's fair. So there is a yin to yang to that. Now, I'll give an example because you brought them up at 2019 LSU. For everybody on audio, I'm pointing to a picture of Joe Burrow.
Yep.
At the Manning Passing Academy, Joe, I say Joe, but I don't mean you. I mean the other Joe. I don't know which Joe I'm talking about.
My brother.
Joe Burrow came out at the Manning Passing Academy in 2019 and said, we're putting up 40 points a game. If the clip goes viral, they're like, there's no way. Tall staff LSU's not doing that. And they did. So there has been an inverse of there being a lot of buzz around a team that has succeeded, and it's really helped them and motivated them like, hey, man, we got to live up to these expectations. People can be motivated by a lot of things. You brought up another point, Will, that you talked about it before the Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel throwing Ryan Day under the bus. You talked about Will Howard. John, I think I'm going to change on you a little bit. Actually, I'm not going to change. That was a wrong way of saying it. I don't know, and if today's game, that system, quote unquote, quarterbacks that make the right decision in college football aren't the ones winning national titles. I really don't. Because you're talking about J.J. McCarthy, who we had a problem with. You legitimately are looking at Stetson Bennett. Well, Mac Jones also was not a highly tooled or talented dude, in my opinion. Told everybody in the draft that. He wins a national title in 2020 because he's making the right decisions. So does this guy behind me. So I get what everybody is saying about Will Howard, but I think I have enough faith in Ryan Day to help him develop and be better.
Okay. I get that, but I don't like this depiction of him as if he's some really strong, nice, easy decision maker.
A lot of the 24 touchdowns passes last year and ran for another 10. So let's pull
the important context. Against Texas, he had one interception on 26 for 41 passing attempts. Against Oklahoma State, 3 interceptions. These are the toughest games on his schedule. He had 2 interceptions. Oh, no, sorry, I'm misreading that. 3 interceptions against Oklahoma State. He had 1 against UCF, 1 against Missouri.
He got pulled against Oklahoma State.
1 against KU. He threw a lot of picks in their most difficult games. I would flip it on you. I think he is more big, toolsy quarterback that needs to be reeled in. I do agree with you. I think Chip Kelly and Ryan Day are going to reel him in, but I don't think that he falls into the Stetson Bennett, J.J. McCarthy bucket. I don't think he does at all.
Okay, I could see the inverse. I think he did make a lot of really good decisions last year that he just didn't have the dudes on the outside to help him either. Joe, he can throw a go route and have 2 Megatrons out there that will go and get the football too. There's a difference when you're around dudes though, which is going to make him look like he's developed more. Joe, this team was on the precipice of getting to the playoff last year. They're not getting worse quarterback play.
No, but this has been my argument. This was my argument the whole time, and why I pissed off Ohio State fans at the time is I argued it wasn't clearly an upgrade. It could be an upgrade. There is potential for him to be better than Kyle McCord, but it's not like there's a litany of tape of him taking over games and dominating. They both have had games littered with interceptions. That's why I have some pause for what we're doing here at the quarterback position. I feel like there's a little bit more certainty when we talk about those Alabama teams, those LSU teams. Yeah, I just don't know what Will Howard is going to be
in that LSU team. People were questioning. They thought they were going to lose to Texas in that week 2 game.
Well, but you guys knew who Joe Burrow was, and you felt
but see, here's the thing.
Good about it, at least.
No, I mean, Burrow.
He also didn't just transfer in. He had already been there for a year.
Correct. That's very fair. But, again, I saw a kid who had 10 TDs and 10 interceptions come into LSU the year before and win the SEC West with far less talent on that team than what Ohio State did. So if you're going to use the LSU comparison, it has happened before. The other thing that you mentioned, Joe, I think more than that, their interior of their offensive line, I think could be an issue that nobody wants to address. I do think that they have a question mark there. Now we'll talk about that when we get to our deep dive with them.
Yeah,
I'm a little weary on the interior of their offensive line.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.